When an indie studio finds success with their first game, it's always exciting to see where they'll go with their second. With the support of a new fanbase, the devs can now confidently spend more time polishing their follow-up game. We've seen a good example of this with studios like Extremely OK Games, who developed Towerfall and then went on to make Celeste. A similar story happened with Analgesic Productions, when their first game, Anodyne, had some success and garnered a cult following. That game was only developed in 9 months by 2 people, and yet Marina Kataka and Melos han-tani from Analgesic Productions managed to make something really special. So when they took 3 years to make their next game, the puzzle platformer known as Even the Ocean, it was inevitable that these two would raise the bar for quality quite a lot. You can see this instantly in the pixel art and music of the game. No longer sticking to a lo-fi Game Boy aesthetic, Marina Kataka, who handled the visuals, went above and beyond to create a really breathtaking world. Even the Ocean combines high pixel count backgrounds for jaw-dropping exploration moments with well-designed lower pixel count characters and levels when the focus is more on gameplay. The amount of aesthetic variety in both of these areas is stunning and keeps the game fresh visually throughout the whole experience. What sells these visuals all the more is the incredible sound design and music handled by Melos han-tani. The music in Anodyne was definitely great, but for Even the Ocean, Melos no longer had the limitation of going for a super lo-fi approach. So now we get much more lush tracks, most of which have a lot of calm, spacey ambience. These are perfect for wandering through the ethereal high pixel backgrounds and soaking in the calming atmosphere. We also get tracks with strong melodies and hypnotic beats that drive you forward, while still being relaxing for the puzzle platforming sections. So the game looks and sounds great, but does the puzzle platforming reach the same peaks as the music and art? 100% yes. This has easily become one of my favorite games of all time, largely because of the incredibly well-designed levels and tight movement controls. You play as Aliph, a technician who fixes power plants. Fixing them plays out through a series of really unique puzzle platforming sections. The most distinctive feature of the gameplay is that you don't have a life bar in the traditional sense. Instead, you have a balancing act of 2 energies. The green or light energy will increase your vertical momentum, and the purple or dark energy will increase your horizontal momentum. The power plants are littered with all sorts of ways of shifting your energy balance from one to the other, opening up a great sense of freedom in how you approach each new challenge. This mechanic works so well on a casual level because you can take it slow and jump higher to make some sections easier. However, if you're an experienced player, you can blitz through the levels running at high speeds. Although having your balance shifted to one end of the spectrum like this comes with a really interesting risk-reward mechanic. If your energy fills up completely on solely light or dark, you will die and reset to the nearest checkpoint, so you need to manage your balance of the 2 energies carefully. The advantages you get from leaning towards one side of the spectrum are really useful, so trying to find the right balance of the 2 for any given situation becomes really fun. You don't want to be too risky so that you might die, but at the same time, you'll want to shift your balance all the time depending on the situation. This allows each puzzle in the game to have a lot of freedom and player agency in how you want to approach it. This energy balancing mechanic is matched in its depth by a great set of core character controls. Your moveset is quite minimalist, but each individual element is refined to be extremely satisfying. Your jumps and wall jumps have an amazing sense of momentum, and many of the puzzles take advantage of this to great effect. They really nailed all the small details of what makes a platformer satisfying to control. For instance, the sound effects really sell all the physicality of your actions, and the game knows when to slow down for a couple of frames to make it really feel like you're bouncing off something. One of my favorite small details is that you can carry your momentum for a long time if you bunny hop at just the right time of your landing. I found myself jumping around everywhere even when I didn't need to, just to try to hit this satisfying chain of bunny hops. Although platforming isn't all that you'll be doing to solve the puzzles in Even the Ocean, your character also has a shield that protects you from energy in the direction the shield is facing. In the beginning, the shield is mostly used for sections where you have to manage where your shield is facing to avoid taking on too much of one energy. However, the more the game goes on, the more things the shield can interact with are introduced. You have geysers that give you extra momentum if you line your shield up with them, energy bullets you can reflect with your shield to hit targets, and so much more. Because the controls for your shield and your jumps are so responsive and smooth, the game never feels unfair or cheap. Also, they took great care so that the difficulty curve is perfect throughout the entire game, so you never get caught with a sudden spike in difficulty. For each level, the game introduces at least one new mechanic for platforming or puzzling. Smartly, these new mechanics are always introduced in a safe environment where you can test them out without any real risk. So when the challenge eventually ramps up throughout the level, you'll have learned the mechanic well enough to use it in higher risk situations. Although if you are still struggling with something, there's even an optional tutorial area where you can learn about each mechanic until you're ready to take them on for real. Now this game can definitely get challenging, but since it's designed to be a really fair challenge, it never feels frustrating and makes for a very chill playthrough. The levels are designed so well to perfectly fit the rate at which you'll be improving that you can easily get into a flow state where you're blazing through the levels in a really satisfying way. However, if you are struggling at any given point, the checkpoints are really generous as you'll only ever be set back around 1 or 2 minutes at most. This design philosophy made this one of the most relaxing games I've played, and I'll surely be replaying it many times. If you want to have an even more relaxing experience, the devs even included a lot of gameplay options you can tweak, some that make the game easier and some for accessibility. What's great specifically for repeated playthroughs is that you can choose to only do certain parts of the game, such as skipping the story entirely or even skipping the exploration sections that precede the main puzzle platforming parts. This is such a nice touch for repeat playthroughs and for speedrunners, and I wish more games allowed for stuff like this. However, you definitely don't want to skip the story on your first playthrough, because just like Analgesic Productions' first game, Anodyne, the story of Even the Ocean is really special. Unlike Anodyne though, Even the Ocean's story is not confusing or cryptic. I made an entire video gushing about why being vague and mysterious worked so well for Anodyne's story. However, that doesn't mean that Even the Ocean's different approach to storytelling isn't just as good, if not better. There is just as much thematic depth here to explore, it's just presented in a much more easily digestible way. The larger themes in Even the Ocean are less about exploring the depths of oneself like in Anodyne and more about humanity as a whole. The game sets out to be a critique of capitalism and power hierarchies, while also tackling more abstract conceptual ideas like balance and inevitability. The thematically driven parts of the game are what push the plot forward, but what's really nice is that Even the Ocean also takes the time to explore its characters' emotions with really vulnerable and emotionally impactful conversations. Bouncing back and forth between these two kinds of storytelling keeps the pacing fresh, and there's also enough funny moments and wacky characters to keep it from getting overly serious. But all of that is just a general overview, so let's take a look into the details of the plot, characters, and themes. I have to give a spoiler warning here for the entire game, as I'll be discussing it in depth. If you want to skip this part, go to the timecode on screen now. Even the Ocean opens on a mysterious storyteller. The entire game is framed as them telling you the events of the game in this log cabin. To reflect this framing device, in brief moments throughout the game, this storyteller acts as a narrator. The true significance of why the game is framed this way is revealed at the end of the game, so I'll talk more about that later. Once you're done with the short opening scene with the storyteller, you're dropped into a beautiful environment and get into the action right away. As I mentioned before, you play as Aliph, and in the opening, you and a fellow technician named Cassidy go to fix a power plant that has stopped working for mysterious reasons. A freak accident ends up breaking your mech suit that protects you from the dangerous energy that's scattered all throughout the power plant. This accident even ends up killing Cassidy. Aliph realizes she has no other option but to press forward and repair the power plant in order to call for help. Aliph fashions a shield from the breastplate of the mech suit to at least have some sort of protection against the dangerous energy. This is where the first real gameplay begins, and you make your way through the power plant by solving energy-related puzzles. You don't get much more of the story until you finish fixing the power plant, call for help, and then head back to the city where you live, Whiteforge. After reflecting on what happened and getting a much-needed night's rest, you get ready to go to Cassidy's funeral the next day. Speaking at the funeral is Yara, Cassidy's partner. She talks about how Cassidy loved the earth, the soil, and how important her garden was to her. Yara says that somehow all of this feels right in a way, returning Cassidy to the moss and the dirt and the bugs that she called her friends. Yara continues to talk about how Cassidy lives on within everyone else and how she affected those around her, and that her story has a ripple effect that lives on past even the conscious memory of her. This speech is really well written and pretty, but on my first playthrough, what I didn't realize was how good it also set up the themes of the story that pay off at the end of the game. The theme of balance is introduced when Yara talks about Cassidy returning to the Earth. Here, Yara is talking about the balance of the circle of life and how it feels right for people's energy to return to the Earth. This balance of energy is important on this smaller scale we see here, but also on the larger scale of the whole Earth. The energy you take from the Earth must be returned to it at some point, or the environment will lose its balance, and it will eventually collapse. The other part of Yara's speech about how Cassidy is still impactful even after she's gone is also thematically important. The ripple effects someone can have on the future can have a real tangible impact on the world. It makes you wonder what kind of impact Aliph will leave on this world through her actions in the game. This theme of affecting the future even after you're gone, and the theme of balance tie into the ending, which I'll get into more detail later. For now though, the funeral is over and you're asked to meet with the mayor of Whiteforge to talk about what happened at the power plant. In your talk, the mayor tries to use this strange situation to take you under their wing and portray you as the hero of Whiteforge for fixing the power plant. They come off as a little suspicious with their creepy smile and all, but Aliph has no real reason not to trust them, so she goes along with it for now. What might start to make the player suspicious is that after your visit with the mayor, you head back to your home in the lower district of the city, Murex Park. We start to see the inequality in Whiteforge, and the critiques of capitalism the game will be exploring start to show themselves here. Coming from the mayor's office in the Apex district, the difference in social hierarchies becomes clear. Murex Park doesn't look like a bad place to live, but the Apex district is obviously given more funding and support by the government, and the people there tend to have a snobby attitude about people they consider lower than them. It's clear this is meant to reflect the kind of social and economic hierarchies that are inherent to a capitalist system that we see in the real world. While we're on the topic of critiquing capitalism, I should also say that it's not only the story where this critique is apparent. Analgesic Productions has said that there was a conscious focus to weave this theme into the gameplay too. This is why there's no violence or environmental destruction in the game, and also why there's no progression system or leveling up. All those gameplay elements can be seen as emblematic of certain parts of a capitalist mindset, so the devs made sure to avoid them to fit the themes of the story. I always appreciate when devs work the themes into the gameplay too, as it often makes the themes of the story hit harder. Anyways, let's get back to that story then. After your visit with the mayor, you end up running into Yara on your way home, and she invites you to have dinner with her. You don't talk much, but you start to feel a connection growing, and it's really sweet to see these two characters be there for each other after they both just went through pretty traumatic events. Though this moment is sweet, you don't get too much time to rest and reflect, as the next day the mayor tells you about how 3 more power plants are having issues. So you set off to fix these 3 power plants, and this sets off the main gameplay and story loop for the first half of the game. That loop consists of going out to the towns where the power plants are, doing some exploring, helping the people there, and learning more about what's really going on with the power plants. Then after each power plant you fix, you head back to Whiteforge, talk to the mayor, grow a little more creeped out by his smile, and then head home. Most of the time on your way home, you stop to have dinner with Yara, and now that you've connected with each other to some degree, you start to have really heartfelt and touching conversations. These were undoubtedly some of the highlights of the game for me because of the incredible dialogue. You talk about the complexities of loving relationships, coping with loss, and much more. At this point in the game, none of the greater mysteries of the plot are really unraveling yet, so these well-written, vulnerable, and honest conversations really help keep you engaged with the story and characters in the first half of the game. Around this same time, you also meet a new character named Humus. You first see them when they're being harassed by people from the Apex district who think they're some sort of bum and want them to leave. Humus struggles to defend themselves from these people because the way they talk comes across like they don't understand human interactions at all. Every response they give is confusing and weird, but there's something intriguing and charming about them too. You become instantly endeared to them because they seem cool and you want to protect them from these jerks who are yelling at them. And even though you can't really make sense of what they say to you, they seem really interesting, so you end up wanting to see more of them. Humus appears a couple more times before the end of the game, but they really only get relevant to the plot closer to the end, so we'll talk more about them later. As you go through this loop of chatting with interesting characters, exploring, and puzzle solving at the power plants, you start to put some of the pieces of the plot together. You find strange looking things at each power plant, and hear rumors about giant beasts appearing before each power plant stops working. It seems like these mysterious occurrences might lead up to some sort of bait and switch plot twist, but surprisingly, they actually don't. The head scientist from Whiteforge tells you that, yes, 3 giant beasts known as geomes are what is causing the power plants to stop working by releasing those weird-looking things that you'd found on site. Somehow, despite the clues, this revelation still caught me off guard. I knew this story had sci-fi elements, but giant mythical beasts just seemed too reality-breaking to be true. Even the ocean is definitely not afraid to go to some weird and surreal places to tell its story, and it's all the better for it. We soon find out that the geomes are closing in on 3 more power plants. The scientists and the mayor have devised a plan for you to redirect those power plants' energy to blow away the geomes as a temporary solution. When you visit the power plants where the 3 geomes have appeared, you see these magnificent creatures for the first time. It really caught me off guard that the geomes look more like spirits of the forest than some scary beast. They look more like one of the mythical beings out of Princess Mononoke, more so than something that's an actual threat. So you might start reflecting on whether what you're doing is even right, especially because the mayor keeps telling you to do these things with that damn creepy smile on his face. Now, even though you may be feeling this way, Aliph still has to push away these geomes from the power plants for now. I mean, Aliph doesn't really know what else to do. People do need the access to energy from these power plants, but the more you reflect on your experiences, the more you start to question the motives of Whiteforge and the power plants. After all, the more towns you go to, the more you realize that the power plants often have a negative or strange effect on the community. For example, Restview Beach used to be frequented for its scenic and natural beauty, but now it barely gets any visitors due to the power plant in the area. Farming communities like Riverton can no longer thrive due to the centralization of food production at Whiteforge. They just can't keep up because of the fact that most of all energy that's collected is being sent to Whiteforge. Some towns' entire cultures have changed because of the power plants. In Oscar Basin, the abundance of access to energy and more technology has made people fixated on material goods. People's attitudes start to change too. They have all their needs met with this energy, so they should always be happy, right? This attitude has caused the people of the town to always want to keep up the appearance of happiness no matter what they may be going through. It leads to a toxic culture where ignorance is bliss seems to be the motto. The more you learn about things like this, the more it seems like the power plants and Whiteforge seem to reflect the follies of capitalism in our own society. The disregard for nature in the endless pursuit of more and more energy and the placating of the masses so they can live in ignorant bliss to the consequences of this are themes that hit all too close to home. Unfortunately, Aliph doesn't seem to have much of a choice in her position to change this system. At this point, many people rely on these power plants to live, and Aliph is just doing her job, so the strange experiences and things Aliph starts to learn about won't stop her from pressing onward. At least Aliph has her dinners with Yara to relieve some tension. I can't stress this enough, these are some of the best moments of the game. The writing is incredible and really explores the emotions of these characters in such an open and honest way. It's a much needed pause from all the chaos of the world where you're able to comfort each other in these stressful moments in your life. However, the stress only continues to rise. Pushing the GMs away wasn't enough. They return shortly after you send them away. Defeating the GMs seems to be hopeless, but this is when the plot drops a major bomb on you. It turns out that scientists have discovered evidence of a civilization with more advanced technology that somehow predates their own. In fact, there's evidence of multiple civilizations like this. However, they all seem to reach the same fate eventually. The geomes would appear, and then they would face a great flood or a devastating drought that would wipe the slate clean for humanity. This new information makes it seem like the geomes must be the cause of the apocalypse if they're not stopped. To prevent this, the scientist tells you about bombs that one of the previous civilizations developed that might defeat the geomes if set off inside of their bodies. All of this feels wrong to Aliph, but in her position, it really looks like she has no choice. She has to kill the geomes to prevent the end of the world. You venture out and find the bombs, then one by one, you find your way into the majestic geomes and destroy them from the inside. Finally, your work should be done, so you return home to Whiteforge. However, after all you've done to try and stop it, a cataclysmic flood has begun. You meet up with Yara and Humus to try and figure out why this is happening, and through your conversation with them, you start to uncover that Humus somehow knows everything about this situation. It turns out Humus isn't human, and is some sort of immortal being who's seen humanity collapse over and over again. You find out that what always causes the floods and droughts is an imbalance of energy in the earth. You understand the importance of this balance of energy really well as the player, because in every moment of gameplay, you are trying your best to keep your own energy from becoming imbalanced. It's really unbelievable how well they managed to weave this theme into the gameplay. The theme also hits harder because this imbalance of energy was caused by Whiteforge and the power plants exploiting the environment, meaning this whole time through your gameplay, you've done nothing but help keep that destructive system going. Through talking more with Humus, you realize that the geomes you tried so hard to defeat were trying to save you the whole time. By stopping the power plants, they were trying to restore the balance of energy to save the world. They were helpful spirits of nature after all. I really can't help but see the parallels to Princess Mononoke in the way these themes of environmentalism are told. I wonder if it was an influence at all. Anyway, the flood isn't stopping, and the guilt-stricken Aliph is rushing to find a way to fix this. Aliph is reminded of the fact that all the power plants can be controlled remotely by Whiteforge, so it may solve the balance problem if she can reverse the energy flow of the power plants to give that energy back to the Earth. Aliph runs off to do this, but she's stopped on her way by the mayor. She tries to tell this plan to them, but the mayor protests that this plan isn't necessarily a sure thing. In their delusional elitist view, the mayor sees it as more important to try and use all the energy they can to lift the Apex district above the coming flood, leaving everyone else below to die. When the mayor is confronted with the reality that their greedy capitalist use of energy is the cause of the apocalypse, their only reaction is to double down on using that energy to save only themselves. This reminds me of how in the real world, people in power who have profited massively off ruining the environment would rather invest their resources into colonizing other planets to save a few people than change their ways and put their resources into healing the planet they've destroyed.
I'm escaping to the one place that hasn't been corrupted by capitalism. Space!
Aliph won't stand for this corruption. She pushes on past the mayor and manages to reverse the flow of energy. However, even that is not enough. In any other game, this moment would be the happy ending where the world goes back to a more nature-focused society, but even the ocean doesn't let you have that happy ending because it wants its messages and themes to hit you even harder. The theme that comes to the forefront here is inevitability. The apocalypse you've been fighting to prevent for a big part of the game turns out to be unstoppable. All Aliph, Yara, and everyone else has left is to comfort each other before the end. This makes you look back on the game and think about how many of the highlights of the story were just spending time with Yara and being there for each other through your struggles. This is meant to convey the importance of being there for one another even in times when it seems that the world is falling apart. If we aren't supporting each other like this, how will any of us have the strength to really fight against the system? After talking with Yara, you start to think about the people you helped along the way. Even though the world would inevitably end, you still made their lives better for the moment, and that still matters. The flood is still coming though, and in the end, all you can do is ask Humus to tell your story to the next generations of people that come after this apocalypse, hoping that they can learn from where your generation failed. The mindset of endlessly trying to gain more power at the expense of the environment needs to be stopped much earlier than when you tried to in Even the Ocean. Maybe the next society that comes along in Even the Ocean's world will not fall so deeply into the trappings of capitalism with the knowledge Aliph passes on. This harkens back to the funeral scenes and the themes of people's impact on the world lasting even past their death. Aliph's story will send ripples of change throughout time, even though she couldn't change the deeply ingrained capitalist system in her time. Though this ending is tragic, the game doesn't have a pessimistic view on humanity. Even the Ocean posits that people aren't simply corrupt because of their desire for power. It's in our DNA to exert power over other species and our environment if it's given to us, and this is understandable as a survival mechanism. However, in modern society, when survival is taken out of the picture, that exertion of power can run rampant. In a system like capitalism, this instinct to hoard power goes completely unchecked. The ideology of capitalism even encourages endless exploitation of the environment to gain more power, no matter the consequences. To cloud people's perception of this, media and goods are used by those in power so that society as a whole is distracted from the imbalance in the environment that will eventually create a disaster. This harmful system can become so ingrained in a society it seems impossible to change it. That's why the cycle in Even the Ocean seems inevitable to continue, but there's still a light at the end of the tunnel. There is a hope to teach future societies to go against this part of human nature that seeks power by using knowledge from this story of an inevitable end. This theme of inevitability hits all the more close to home when you realize our generation in real life is in a similar position to the society of Even the Ocean. We are on the brink of environmental disaster, and so many of us are fighting and trying our best to stop the people in power from pushing us further into hurting the planet. It's especially difficult to challenge this system because, like in Even the Ocean, many people have grown to depend on the things that destroy the environment to get by in daily life. We were born in a time when seemingly insurmountable power structures have been in place for centuries. It's easy to feel defeated in that it's inevitable that capitalism will continue to exploit the planet for ill-gotten gains. In Even the Ocean, this system can't be overtaken and the apocalypse is inevitable. However, the true message of this ending lies in the glimmer of hope that people in the future will learn from the current generation's mistakes. Even the Ocean refuses to give you a happy ending because you are the one that needs to learn from this story. Before the credits roll, it's revealed that the storyteller from the beginning of the game was Humus, and they were telling you Aliph's story. You live in a society similar to Aliph's, a world that's on the brink of disaster, but unlike Aliph's world, it's not too far gone to save. I think this ending really neatly solidifies the message that this game is something to be learned from and applied to the real world. You are a part of the generation that still has hope for the future. After this scene with Humus, the ending credits roll as you continue to think about the themes and messages of this wonderful game. As a nice touch, during these credits we see some photos of the devs and snippets from early development. However, the peek behind the development curtain doesn't end there. After all, this is an Analgesic Productions game. Of course they have some great post-game content to explore. Like in Anodyne, once again they let you break the game with a new power, and they also show you insights into the dev process and early prototypes. Fun messages from the devs about the development are scattered throughout the post-game too, which is a nice touch. I think it's always a great reward for beating a game to see how they created it and their thoughts on development. I mean, after all, after spending so much time in a world, of course you're interested in how it was created, and I really appreciate that Analgesic Productions always goes to the extra effort to show this. Even the ocean really nailed it on every mark for me, and any complaints I had were so minor that they weren't really worth including in this video. The game just does so much right, more than just gameplay and story too. There's great care taken to have diversity in the representations of people of color, there's a lot of well-written women, there's a lot of different body types, and there's even the fact that most of the romantic partners in the game are queer. Further touches like adding a lot of accessibility options so more people are able to play comfortably just goes to show that Analgesic Productions really cares about the people who play their games. They're a real positive influence on the video game community, and I really hope more people play and appreciate their amazing work. I will definitely be covering their next game, Anodyne 2, sometime soon, so subscribe if you want to see that. In the meantime, let me know your thoughts on Even the Ocean in the comments and your interpretations of the game's plot and themes. I'm always eager to discuss this studio's games with you all, so I really appreciate the comments and support for these videos. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day.